culture is a set of shared ideals, values, and standards of behavior. It is a common element that allows the members of a society to correctly interpret each other's actions and gives meaning to their lives. Because they share a common culture, people can predict how others are most likely to behave in a certain circumstance and react accordingly. A group of people from different cultures deserted on an uninhabited island for a period of time might appear to become a sort of society. They will have a common interest, survival, and will develop techniques for living and working together. Each of the members of this group, however, will retain his or her own identity and cultural background, and the group will break up easily as soon as its members were rescued from the island. The group would have been merely a collection of individuals without a unified cultural identity. Society may be defined as a group of people who not only are dependent on each other for survival, but also share a common culture. How these people depend upon each other can be seen in such things as their economic systems and their family relationships. Moreover, members of society are held together by a sense of common identity. The role-governed relationships that hold a society together, with all their rights, duties, and obligations, are known as its social structure. Culture and society are two closely related concepts, and anthropologists study both. Obviously, there can be no culture without a society, just as there can be no society without individuals. Conversely, there are no non-human societies that do not exhibit culture. Some other species of animals, however, do lead a social existence. Ants and bees, for example, instinctively cooperate in a manner that clearly indicates a degree of social organization. Yet, this instinctive behavior is not a culture. One can, therefore, have a society, but not a human society, without a culture, even though one cannot have a culture without a society. While a culture is shared by members of society, it is important to realize that not everything is uniform. For one thing, no one has exactly the same version of his or her culture. Beyond such individual variation, however, there is bound to the same further variation within a culture. At the very least, in any human society, there is some difference between the roles of men and women. This stems from the fact that women give birth but men do not, and that there are obvious differences between male and female bodies. What every culture does is to give meaning to these differences by explaining them and deciding what is to be done about them. Every culture also determines how these two different kinds of people should relate to one another and to the world at large. Since each culture does this in its own way, there is tremendous variation from one society to another. Anthropologists use the term gender to refer to the cultural systems and meanings assigned to the biological difference between the sexes. Thus, though one's sex is biologically determined, one's sexual identity or gender is culturally constructed. The distinction between sex, which is biological, and gender, which is cultural, is an important one. Presumably, gender differences are as old as human culture, about 2.5 million years, and arose from the biological differences between early human males and females. Early human males were about twice the size of females, just as males are today among such species as gorillas and orangutans, which are related to humans. In the course of human evolution, however, the biological differences between the two sexes were radically reduced. Thus, apart from differences directly related to reproduction, whatever biological basis there once was for gender role differences has largely disappeared. Nevertheless, cultures have maintained some distinctions of gender roles ever since, although these are far greater in some societies than in others. Strangely enough, gender differences were more extreme in late 19th and early 20th century Western societies, where women were expected to submit completely to male authority, than they are among most historically known pre-agricultural peoples whose ways of life resemble those of the late Stone Age ancestors of Western people. Among them, relations between men and women tend to be characterized by the spirit of equality, and although they may not typically carry out the same tasks, such arrangements tend to be flexible. In other words, differences between the behavior of men and women in Western societies today, which are thought by many to be rooted in human biology, are not so rooted at all. Rather, they appear to have been recently elaborated in the course of history. In addition to cultural variations associated with gender, there will also be some related to differences in age. In any society, children are not expected to behave as adults, and the reverse is equally true. But then, who is a child and who is an adult? Again, although the age differences are natural, cultures give their own meaning to the human life cycle. In the United States, for example, individuals are not regarded as adults until the age of 21. In many others, adulthood begins earlier. Often, it is not tied so much to age as it is to passage through certain established rituals.